Next is a very interesting session from Michael Johnson. He's one of the leading graphic designers in the world and very famous for his creativity, imagination and talent. He's going to do a very interesting session, interactive session now with us, explaining some of his works and engaging the public with him. So thank you, Michael.
Sure. Shall I wait a minute whilst you all sit down? Oh, Corinne?
Yes.
Shall I?
We have to ask the boss.
Shall I stretch? Shall I stretch a little? I can stretch a little.
Clémence, Pascal, how much time do we have for? I think we have 20, 25 minutes. Is that? Yes. 25 minutes. Okay.
25 minutes. Okay. Sets timer. It's an old trick. Works beautifully. Start. Okay. Okay, the title of this talk is Brave, Bold, or Anonymous, You Decide. The reason why I wanted to talk about this was that I've been working in the cultural sector for 15 years, maybe a couple of decades, and I have noticed that sometimes there's a bit of reticence. Things can get a little bit conservative sometimes. The kind of things I'm going to talk about, just briefly, I'm a brand consultant. We work in London, but we work across the world, Paris, New York, Japan and China, and now the Gulf. I'm going to talk a little bit about the barriers to good work. I'm going to talk a bit about chaos and control. I'm going to talk about a little thing that I do called the thumb test, which you might find interesting and useful. I'm going to talk about how you unlock the creativity within yourselves and within the people that work for you. And then clarity and consistency, looking at the whole thing. And I'm going to use a mixture of examples, some of the things that we do, some of the things that people all over the world have done. So there will be a good mixture of things. And there will be a few opportunities for you to shout at me and suggest things and complain and throw tomatoes at me and all those kind of things. So first of all, I've been collecting some slides for quite some time now. I wanted to share them with you. And this is a phrase that we say in English called a Me Too, and we live in a world of Me Toos. It's very strange, this. That if you are designing and running a metro system somewhere in the world, someone always makes the logo look the same as someone else's, okay? They look exactly the same. I suppose it means you can get out of the tube in any city in any world and you know where the metro is, because they all look exactly the same. Equally, if you want to buy some luxury goods, they look pretty similar too. They're all grey, they all have capitals, and there are spaces between the capitals. If your job is to design a tourism logo, it's clear what you have to do. You have to make it look like everybody else's tourism logo. And sure enough, they all look the same. I didn't, there's a website that collects these. All I did was make a screen grab. It's very interesting to see exactly what happens. But the truth is that I'm sorry to say this, and some of this will come across as a bit harsh, I'm sorry. Museums aren't that much better, okay? No, each of these organizations is sure that their logo is unique and is completely different to everybody else's, but the thing is, they look quite similar too, yeah? It's quite strange, this, including one of my favorite logos of all time. And so I've been collecting slides and examples for quite a while now to kind of illustrate some of these points. So I'm going to share some of these with you now. This is a poster from about 10 years ago, taken in South Kensington in London, and it's the kind of generic setting, a default setting, if you like, of cultural branding, the big, what we say, bleed picture with the type on it, a logo tiny and in the corner. And you walked into a London museum 10 years ago, and all the posters looked the same. It was actually very hard to work out whose logo was which. Who does that belong to? Those are posters from the National Gallery and the Tate on the same wall, but you had no idea because they all look the same. Anyway, so actually, about a decade ago, I started designing things that made me, as I looked at these, and I thought, well, I'll design posters around this as a sort of joke. So I started to imagine what the perfect cultural museum poster should look like, okay? Title goes here in suitably museum-y type. Yes? Don't forget, to tell them the full name of the show, again, in case they forgot, the full name of the museum again, in case the logo didn't tell them, and then the dates of the show and how to get there, what time, what tube, all in a few blocks of range left time, the phone number, sponsor's name, museum name, ideally with a big letter. Okay. Yeah. Now, I did that about 10 years ago, and I of course hoped that everything would change, but actually, I'm not sure that everything has changed. And I'm sorry, you're a good crowd. I'm glad you find this funny. Sometimes I show these slides and you can see the audience like this. Anyway. And as we know, I'm not going to make a big deal about this, but there are now more channels, there's more pressure on us. Everything that we do is subject to so many demands. Everything that we do and communicate is on a phone, on an app, in Facebook, on Twitter, on Flickr, you pick up a leaflet. The way that you communicate and you interact with a museum and what it's trying to say is very, very disparate. Very ever-changing now, and eventually you pick up the brochures. So, the old days of there are 3 ways that you would communicate with an exhibition, well, those are gone, because there are now 203 ways that you communicate with an exhibition. Thank you. In the old days, of course, there was a building, and people would visit in person. They'd buy books, they'd buy merchandise, and they'd come back on the internet, maybe they'd view a video. That was all fine. That was an easy system, wasn't it? But now, well, actually, and I'm not going to bang on that much about brand today, but if we know who we are, then we're going to get a certain amount of physical visitors, but increasingly, we'll get a massive amount of online visitors. Damien talked yesterday about, what's the stat? 3.5 million people going to the V&A, 30 million going online. So this is really changing the dynamic of how museums work and how we should and could communicate. In fact, I've been thinking recently, and there were a few hints at this in some of the sessions and what was talked about yesterday. Actually, in the end, you could argue that what stands in the middle is your purpose. What is your reason to be? What is your brand idea? And actually, the museum itself is just a channel. The building just delivers one part of the experience, because people are as interested on the shop or the videos or the channels or the object database or the Facebook pages, and it goes on and on and on. And in a funny sort of way, the museum is not really in the middle of that conversation anymore. It's just part of a long and more digital conversation, and then it's all encompassed by the search on Google. If you are not on that first page in Google, then we're in trouble, really. And increasingly, as you know, I'm sure you know this, but in case you don't know, more and more museum homepages are being skipped because people are going straight to the content because of the Google search. Google has become our homepage, okay? So, anyway, I think you knew all of that, so I'm not going to bang on about that. What I am going to do is talk to you about the thumb test, okay? This is something I've been using for some time, and this is a little test that I use to help fight anonymity, if you like. So if we take this example I showed you a little while ago, if you hold your thumb over the logo, whose poster is it? That's kind of tough to know, actually. I mean, obviously very, very small here, it said Victoria and Albert Museum. So I'm going to show you a few examples, and you can tell me what you think. I'm going to check the time. How am I doing? Oh, all right. Okay, so if you're from London or from Australia, you can't answer these questions, okay? But what you're going to do now, the people who aren't from London, are going to tell me, whose poster is this? What's that? The answer was it's the RMG, and nobody knows what the RMG is. Does anybody know? Else know? No? Isn't that interesting? None of you know. None of you know. Wow. I thought I'd get like 20. Okay. Okay, let's try this one. Who's this? Again, if you're in London. Actually, okay, if you're in London, you can answer the question. Nobody knows. Okay, I'll try another one. This is extraordinary. Okay, whose exhibition is this? Yeah, okay, hurrah, great, we got some answers, yeah. But it's interesting, isn't it, how difficult the answers are. The Royal Museums in Greenwich, the Saatchi Gallery and the Hayward Gallery. But because the branding is so small, you can't really tell who the hell it is. Let's try some internationals now. Okay, if you're based in Paris, you can't answer. Who's this? Yeah, but you said that you were in France, you know. Okay, imagine you're not in France, where is it? You're cheating. Okay, if you're based in Germany, you can't answer. Anyone outside Germany? Who's that? That's tougher, isn't it? Somewhere in Berlin. Somewhere in Berlin was the suggestion. Very good, yeah, you're good, yeah. Whoever you are, you're good, yeah. Okay, what about this one? Somewhere in the east. Someone's going to say. No, any suggestions? No. God. Yeah. Okay. Well, this one. If you're Spanish, you can't say. Yeah. Very good, but I think that person's based in Spain, so that's cheating. Okay. So yes, the answers are the Pompidou Center, Jewish Museum, Berlin. That is the Tokyo Museum, and this is Guggenheim Bilbao. Yeah. Again, so this disease, if you like, of forgetting to brand your own poster or your own communication is rife, and it happens across the world. And I'm not entirely sure why you, as a group, do this, because it seems extraordinary to me that you would actually choose to not brand things. So how do we beat this? How do you get around my issue? How do you beat the thumb test? Well, okay, my point A is be bolder. Do something about it. Try and stand out a little. Now, as I say, I've been tracking this sector for a while now, and I've been using this diagram for a while, which sort of shows you, I'm going to explain it to you and then give you a few examples. If we have chaos over here and we have control over here, if we have passive brand down here and we have active brand up there, I'm going to start with London because that's kind of the market I know. I think an undefined amount of time ago, a lot of London organisations were kind of there, okay? They were kind of passive and a little bit chaotic. You know, they didn't really know what they were doing with their brand. They kind of figured they were somewhere there and they weren't really sure. Funnily enough, Tate, even its previous guys, was at least had some idea of where it was going and what it was doing. Now, what I'm going to show you next is the movement, okay? The movement is quite dramatic. So I'm just using London as an example. Over the last decade, really, that I've been studying this sector, the movement is that way, okay? So everybody, it wants an active control brand. They want more engaging. They want to engage their audiences. And they're all moving in that direction, okay? I should point out that this is not based on any forensic scientific sample. This is just me and what I think, okay? So you can, as I say, you can beat me up later about this. And people often do take huge issue with this slide, so I'm sorry. Then I feel like there's another layer, which is people who want to be at the top right of the quadrant, but are kind of sludging over there. And apologies to people who are actually in the room and at those organizations. But there's this kind of... See, I told you. So there's clearly a movement. People want to control their brands more, but what tends to happen is that they not necessarily, it's not becoming what they want it to be. They're not really moving into that sector because they might inch into it and then they fall down into passive again. So I just lost all of my clients by showing this slide. But you know, we're sharing, okay? And the Design Museum, as many of you will know, are moving to a new building. So it'd be interesting to see where they go next, what they plan to do with their brand. Now, it's more controversial, of course, for me to use these slides when we talk about international, because you know we're not doing that many projects around the world. So, you know, but as a lot of you will know, the Rijksmuseum have recently rebranding. And I think, it's hard to tell, haven't seen the full rollout yet, but I think this old Dunbar logo is over 30 years old. So I think they obviously look like they're trying to control their brand much more than they did before, because it was kind of great, but kind of chaotic before. MoMA just gets stronger and stronger and stronger, I would argue. Now, some of you, I don't know how many of you have seen this recently, but the Whitney have recently taken what was already quite a radical thought and they've made it even more radical. But they're actually kind of going in a different way. That's not necessarily towards control, but they're going actually slightly towards chaos, which is interesting. Anyway, and these, well, we could maybe discuss these later, depending on how much time the team let us have. But I'm not really sure where these are going, actually. I'm not completely sure because, yes?
Please explain what chaos means.
Chaos?
Yeah, chaos means. I mean, in your
Chaos means no structure. It could go anywhere. Yeah. So I will show you actually some slides in a minute of the Whitney, and the Whitney is all over the place, but in a good way. Yeah. The question was, what does chaos mean? Okay, just in case you didn't hear. We're going to come back to this. I put these slides at the end of my little talk, so in 15 minutes' time we can come back and discuss these. But it's an interesting framework, if you like, for analysis. Clearly, what some of you will have noticed is that most of those organizations I've been talking about have actually technically rebranded at the same time. One of the few to not rebranded but have actually made a huge change, of course, is the V&A, and we heard Damien talk about this yesterday. Much more controlled brand, omnipresent logo, always part of the image and great content. Now, and also what the V&A have been doing, and sometimes we've been involved with this. We weren't involved in this one, but I loved this idea, which was Decode, which was a digital exhibition where the logo for Decode was actually given open source back to the community, and people could recode the decoded symbol, which I thought was especially neat. Anyway, we'll come back to the V&A in a sec. It is really difficult to keep this up, though. I think some of you maybe in the audience are thinking, well, yes, I'd like to do that, but how do I keep doing these kind of interesting, interactive, flexible ideas? Here's an example from 6 years ago, the rebrand of the South Bank, which started at a very, very high volume. Okay, started with a very kind of grand and a very pretty scheme, where the elements of the scheme are omnipresent. They're in everything that they do. But 6 years later, look what's happened. It's sort of in the sponsors' logos down here. So you've gone from this very high statement of brand to this very low statement of brand. Again, huge apologies to the South Bank Centre, but you know the truth doesn't lie, really. One of my favourite schemes of all time, the Musée d'Orsay, started at a very, very high volume, and now equally has become also very low volume. And actually, the Musée d'Orsay was a precursor to the V&A logo, in case you're a design geek like me. It's very interesting. But that's a bit of a shame to me when you have such a beautiful symbol such as this. It's not just about how big is your logo and how big is my symbol, just so you know. This isn't, in my opinion at least. I think it's about how organizations interpret what they've done and take that out to the public. There was a discussion yesterday about how you interpret an exhibition and make it into a piece of communication, and even organizations are obviously going in the right direction. This is the V&A show, the Diaghilev show from last year, and this was the most amazing show, if any of you saw it, just fabulous. But the paradox was it didn't really, and there's a beautiful cocktail poster that I loved. So you had this incredibly far-reaching, interesting show, but it didn't really make it onto here. Now I know, I'm virtually certain there was a huge baronial debate between the content team and this team and that team and the other, and I know that you all experienced this. And so I'm obviously putting the V&A on a pedestal, but it's actually still difficult even for the V&A to get everything right. And apologies to Jane and the team for pointing this out on the slide, but that didn't really sum up that, and it is really hard to do, I know. So how do we solve some of these problems is my kind of rhetorical question at this point. Well, I think it's really good to have good glue, good graphic glue, if you like. I'll give you an example. We're not working with them anymore, but we were working with La Villette, Parc de la Villette in Paris, northeast Paris, and they looked like this at the end of the 90s, a kind of grab bag of many different approaches and styles. And frankly, we thought this was a bit of a mess, really. And they were asking, how can we bring this together? And we were asking, well, we're struggling here because there are logos down at the bottom which we think are sponsors, but they almost looked a little bit like another sponsor. Yeah, I know that we all as cultural organizations have this problem, yeah? Which is, when my logo's that small, who's who? I mean, was this really an exhibition put on by Paris Premier? I'm not sure. And we were saying that we didn't think that this was a good system. So we said, it was a very simple idea, we think you should own the edges of everything that you do. So just a really simple idea, whether it be here or here or here. You must own the edge, and you write the words upside down if you want to, it doesn't really matter. And then, as part of communication, you would place these bars onto the edges of posters and edges of all the things that we did. And we started to do this. Actually, we only meant to work on this for a year or so, and we worked on this for nearly 8 years in the end. Because we had so much fun. And also, it's fairly rare. In London, you don't often get asked to do a naked Macbeth on horseback poster. Okay? It's fair to say that we'd never been asked to do a naked Macbeth on horseback poster before. And so we kept doing that. But the important thing is you are in no hesitation that this is La Villette, those are the sponsors, okay? But by dwarfing the relationship, if you like. And here you see how this idea panned out. This is taking a few greatest hits from several years. And in fact, even if that weird kind of stripe fell off the posters, you'd still get a general idea that this was Lavalette. This was, in theory, past my thumb test because of the consistent use of one typeface and things like that. I think it helps a lot to have very simple, clear brand ideas. I'll give you an example of that. We've been working in Japan. It's a space observatory in Japan. Asked us to help them explain what it really was that they did, and all of the things they wanted to talk about were very technical. They were talking about double star clusters and the cores of planets and things like that. And they wanted to talk about the Milky Way, for example. And we would say, well, that's fine, but what's the Milky Way like? And they said, well, it's a bit like a washing machine, kind of. So we thought that was interesting. But the point about having a clear, strong, central brand idea is that we said to them, well, we think what you should do is bring the cosmos down to Earth, okay? And let's just remember that in everything that we do and try and do that all the time. And they said, well, what do you mean? And we said, well, let's put the two together. You know, put the cosmos and the down to Earth together, and then point at it. You know, so this says Sendai City Tenmondai, Sendai Astronomical Observatory, and this is technically the logo that points at an example. And then we developed a whole series of examples. So Saturn's rings becomes the hula hoop. So hopefully this helps your average school child in Sendai, which is near Fukushima actually, understand what, in the way that runners orbit a planet, the planets orbit. You know, this is that famous double star cluster, which behaves a bit like fried eggs. It's called Nijusidan in Japanese. I've got this very strange Japanese vocabulary. That's a black hole. A black hole behaves a little bit like a plug hole, you know, and all this kind of thing. So you get the idea. And within the museum itself. So really, that's just one very, very simple core idea, applied and applied, 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 and applied. I think I'm also really interested in collecting ideas that are elastic, that they shrink and they expand. And I'm going to use a few examples from across the world here, which some of you will know and some of you won't, actually. This is designed by Base Design for the Haus der Kunst, and the logotype actually stretches, it actually moves. In the way that it moves around the top of the building, it actually moves and stretches as a sort of little piece of elastic across their communication. So you could, in theory, squash it right down if you needed to fit it into a small space. I mean, 5 years ago, no one would dare do something like this. So this is really intriguing piece of communication to me. This is the Documenta work by Left Loft, which is really interesting as well. There's no fixed typographic identity for Documenta 13. And this has been incredibly successful as well. And this actually is the Whitney work that I was alluding to earlier. The Whitney W, they have a word mark and they have a W, but then they have many, many different ways of doing this, and you can actually squash and stretch the W into virtually any format that you wish it to go into. So here you see some more examples. Now this is on the edge of chaotic, but it's kind of nice if you think about my diagram 5 minutes ago. It kind of works somehow. I think. A lot of people have issues with that identity, which is fair enough. This is a lovely bit of work by a Korean team for the BMW Guggenheim Lab project, which is touring the world. And people's comments on Twitter and via social media are fed into the lab logo, so it's populated by people's words and commentary, which is a really nice idea and a really lovely bit of work. And we've also been working with the Guggenheim on a global art project. We've been doing this with JWA, and we've been naming this project, which is a kind of global map of global art. But because the Guggenheim are going to collect the art, we have no art to show, really. We've been using land masses, but done in a very abstract way. So here you see some examples, and we've designed a whole series of animations which they use at launches and at events where these are meant to be very, very slow, by the way, in case you're wondering. Why is these QuickTime so slow? And so they cross-fade, and they talk about the 3 areas of the world that they're going to curate art from without being able to show any of the art yet. And then a sort of the map, mix, amplify, propel idea throws itself across screens like this. So that's a kind of a holding screen. I mean, increasingly, you can see that ideas for moving images, ideas for TV, ideas for digital are really important in what we do and what we should all be doing. I'm going to show you some more examples about innovation, taking risks and trying harder. There were some great examples in the awards just now of people really trying some really different things. And those are the things that get noticed and help you stand out. I've been battling for years now with curators about how to crop a picture. Okay, you all know all about this, I'm sure. And I found this example only recently, just before I flew out. Actually, this is by 2x4. It's in Boston, and you know the classic thing about we've got to show how the children can interact with the work. Well, they just slapped the picture on the art. I think this is fantastic. You know, art comes to life. There's another example here. So the And we've all been in that meeting, yeah, when the curator has said, no, you can't do that. You can't possibly slap a picture of that on that. But I suppose what I'm doing is I'm questioning that, and I'm saying to you as well that maybe we could question all of the rules that we took for granted about this kind of thing. So it's a lovely bit of work. We've been trying to change the way... Okay, that was a reminder. Okay, reminded me to speed up. What was that? Oh, okay, all right, I'll speed up. We've been trying to help people navigate a way around the V&A, which is a beautiful museum, but it's complex. And so we talk about the V&A being an inspiring place where you discover many things. So we've tried a different style of map, actually. This is what we've done. For a couple of years now, we tried this where you've got these strange-looking maps, curated by famous celebrities and designers, if you like. And so this is Paul Smith. And when you open it out, here are his 15 or 16 things. From the 900 million objects in the V&A, he's chosen 16 just for you, and you can go around his particular tour of the V&A. And they're actually just a folded piece of paper, but they unfold in a rather beautiful way, like this. And we did 10 one year, and then we did 10 the next. Here's a whole series of them. Massively difficult to do and time-consuming. Nightmare, really. But and then we built these. Then we built these metal stands that look like the leaflets. These weigh a ton each, literally. But I suppose the point of showing you this is, well, try it. Just try it. You know, you never know. And here's famous children's book author Jacqueline Wilson on the V&A's TV channel explaining the idea. So again, you can see the leaflets. If you can visit, you see it. But you could also, of course, visit online. And the last thing I'm going to show you very quickly, I'll be about 5 minutes, team, won't be long, is just encouraging you to see the whole, not just parts of the communication. We've been working with the Science Museum. This is Science Museum in London, I should say, a much treasured and much loved museum, but kind of fusty-dusty. They didn't really want to talk about scientists any longer. They certainly didn't want to talk about Back to the Future any longer. And the issue really is that science to a certain age group, well, it's kind of boring, isn't it? You know, and they would say to us, Michael, this is a great project. The problem is we're not sure about the word science, and we're not sure about the word museum. So you're sort of thinking, well, that's going to be a bit of a problem. And they talk about this thing called the baton pass. I call it the baton pass, which is the grandpa will take the son to the Science Museum. And, you know, here's my museum son, isn't it great? And there's a sort of inference that, you know, the son won't go again until he's a grandpa. You know, that's a long time. And we were trying to think, well, we've got to get around that. We've got to try and make a museum that's interesting to 20-somethings, because generally they just dump it until they start having a family. So what we've been doing is we've been trying to think about the museum as a whole. Yes, it's architecture, it's environment, it's content, but also the visual identity and digital platform, they kind of spin around something. And in the middle, of course, is a good idea. We just need a good idea, whether it be a brand, an idea, or a purpose, whichever word you want to choose. And so in the Science Museum's case, interesting architecture, not brilliant, interesting, getting there, wonderful content, so those are kind of bold, but the core idea is grey because there was none. The digital platform was dreadful, and the visual identity was all over the place. So, and I don't think there's anyone from the Science Museum here, so I can say that. And then we set off trying to make that anonymous logo on the left into something interesting, and developed it like this. I'm not going to whiz through this, so you get the idea. And we developed this quite unusual symbol for them that at first takes a little bit of time to decode, but we liked that idea. They liked the idea that you had to work at it a little. That was the way they structured themselves before then, now they can structure themselves in a very simple, monolithic kind of way. Of course, they have typefaces and they can punch things out of big metal walls and do the obligatory donor wall. That's all fine. Oh, and the flag. But the important bit, I think, about this last couple of minutes is how it comes to life. Yet you can. What we're saying to the Science Museum is pull it apart, do whatever you want to it, really. You know, if you want to turn the logo into Space Invaders t-shirts, that's absolutely fine. And that is the most successful t-shirt they've ever done, actually, interestingly. Or Tetris, if you want. You know, that's fine. I personally loved this one, but this isn't the most successful poster of all time. But I thought it was a great geek joke, which is where the pi definition goes off the bottom of the t-shirt. You know. I thought it was great. I don't think it sold that well in mine. They did these. You know. Someone talked earlier about the sign of success is when the client can take your idea on. And very nice lollipops. And you see how this all, you know, terrible jokes on the bag. And, you know, and then maybe in an unusual step, we started to work on their identity and how it would communicate from an advertising perspective. And how would you talk about genetics? Well, let's take a family and take their faces off, and then link, critically, very importantly, link the title to the logo in all cases. How do we get those 20-somethings to come back to the museum? Well, let's hold lates. I know everybody does lates. Let's have exhibitions about climate change, and let's put them together and get that audience to come back sooner than when they're 37 and they've started the family. And so now you get 6,000 people going on a Friday night and there's a big sign that says no children, so they go and have a really great time. We're trying to work out how to communicate in a more sophisticated way for them about quite mundane things. There's an exhibition about everyday objects, so turning everyday objects into beautiful objects, and then working out how to animate them. I don't know how it works in your countries and your cities, but increasingly London is a town full of screens. Okay, so our job has moved in from poster designers to electronic media designers, and we have to, every time we do these projects, so if we talk about WebLab, which some of you would have seen, this amazing project with Google, we had to also think about how to explain WebLab in 10 seconds as you go up an escalator. So you have literally 10 seconds to explain an exhibition, which is actually very, 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 very difficult to do. And at the moment we're imagining what this famous family would look like in 3D, and we're talking about a 3D summer. So as you can see, we're taking huge liberties with the idea and the identity, how it might work digitally. And how it It's a bit hard to put a slide after that. Apart from this slide, yeah. So, you know, mess with it. Let it be what it will be. So you're allowed to do whatever you want with an idea like this. So just to wrap up, because I'm running out of time. I have run out of time. That diagram I showed you earlier, now we've populated it. And with JWA's help, we've put a core idea in the middle, the home of human ingenuity. So the map, if you like, the brand map from a visual and verbal approach makes sense. And just as a kind of aid about the kind of things I've been talking about, consistency and clarity. It's great to have rules, but maybe not great to have a straitjacket. Good glue beats the thumb test. Do you remember the thumb test earlier? A clear brand idea is always going to help. Follow it through all the channels if you can. Navigate the fiefdoms that will stop your poster outside looking anything like the exhibition on the inside. And the last one, really, relationships beat budgets. We all know that the budgets aren't so great in this sector, but if you keep a relationship with a trusted supplier or a trusted friend or a trusted company, then each of those little 10 grand projects will add up to a relationship. Just chopping and moving on, chopping and moving is the reason why some people's communications look very slapdash and incoherent, really. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michael. Thank you, it was brilliant. And we are lucky because we have 10 minutes for questions. So, I mean, maybe the first question would be, what would be your key learnings? I mean, after the brilliant session of before, it was a great connection to do the ITCA Awards and you just after.
Yeah.
So what would be your, I mean, in one sentence, your key learnings?
From the which one? Which session?
From all, I mean, you've done, and what?
Oh,
what
from the
would
work
you
that we've done?
Yes.
At the moment, it's flexibility.
Okay.
Flexibility. I think we all think that someone somewhere told us once that identity and brand was that everything was locked down and everything had to be very simple and there's nowhere to go. But now I'm very interested in flexibility.
Excellent. Any question in the audience to Michael?
Stunned silence.
Yes.
I don't mind, really. Damien's about to ask me what colour I like.
Claire. Could be a good start.
Oh, not working. Hello, it's Claire here from Tate, and thank you for being
Can you switch on?
Oh. Does it work?
It's okay.
Hello, it's really loud, Claire from Tate. Thank you very much for being nice about our brand. I was slightly terrified throughout your entire presentation. I wanted to ask, in an age where we're becoming increasingly less in control of our media and more digital media and word of mouth, how do you incorporate tone of voice of an organisation in with your visual brand work?
It's a really good question. Funnily enough, we're grappling at the moment with the Science Museum tone of voice, which is difficult because I know there was a session about it yesterday, but I'm not sure that came to any clear conclusions yesterday. What we're doing in the Science Museum is we're trying to stop them talking that fuddy-duddy way about objects. And here's an object that's very interesting, and we're trying to get them to activate their tone of voice. It is really hard because curators and content providers are used to writing in a particular way. And what we've now held a series of sessions with them. We're trying to say, well, stop writing like this, write like this. And at first, initially, the reaction has been a little bit difficult because people are used to writing in a particular way. But we've been experimenting with sessions where we give them examples and we try and write them differently, try and make it active, try and make it interesting. It is difficult, especially as you say, in digital media, because you're trying to get so few things through. But I think that, so I'm thinking of the workshop I did just the other day, that certain members of that particular client, that particular museum, really get it. And no disrespect, it tended to be the younger ones in the workshop who got it. People who'd been writing exhibition labels for 25 years struggled with the idea of how would you express a brand in 140 characters. It's a challenge. But I think it's possible. I think in a way that's the next hurdle in your sector, is to how to communicate visually and branding. That's quite a big hurdle, and we're still getting over that. But how to then bring that through into words is a big hurdle, and is the next big one, really, I think. It's a good test, though. If you get people in a room and say, you've got 140 characters, express this. It works really well, actually. Good question.
Very good. Any other question? Yes? Can you introduce yourself?
Hello, my name's Marianne and I'm from Welcome Collection in London. My question is, how long do you expect an innovative brand to last?
Well, that's a good question. You're in the dark there, aren't you, Marianne? Yeah, Marianne's in the dark up there. If you don't know, the Welcome Collection is a fabulous collection of stuff, with some very, very good grown-up museums, grown-up exhibitions. When I started this business, I thought a great identity should last 15, 20 years. And I've been proven wrong in that you see things changing now within 4 or 5 years. And I used to think that was bad. I used to think that that's terrible that things can change that fast. In a way, though, now I think about it more, it's a sign that what we do as communicators, as branders, as designers, whatever we call ourselves, it's a sign that our job is very important. And actually, because none of us really have advertising budgets, it becomes the brand that's doing the communication. I suppose you could see how maybe changing every 4 or 5 years can be a logical thing to do. Personally, I'm not that keen on it. I personally, if Damien rang me on Monday and said, Michael, I want to change the V&A logo, I'd stop him, because there's a great logo. But you can see instances when you can understand why someone would want to change. And so, reluctantly, I can understand how this 4 or 5 year thing has started. I think a lot of it is to do with the quality of the original idea. So the museum's logo here, what a great idea. Rauschenberg's signature, bang. Why should you ever change that? It has to be a fantastic, phenomenally good idea to change that. So same with the V&A. Probably the same with MoMA. Well, last time MoMA changed, it went just tiny little bit. So. But then there are others, and we can all think of identities around the world in the cultural sector. We think, oh, it's just a bit, it's just a bit. But it's a good question. Thank you.
Yes, one question.
Oh, Michael, hi. Just wondering about your feedback or comments on programs or exhibitions sitting within the brand itself.
Yeah.
For example, I'm thinking of at the Powerhouse Museum we have a children's website called Play, and the Play brand, if you like, has to sit within the museum's brand. Or we have the Sydney Design Festival, which goes out to very talented designers, and they're all kind of making the identity, if you like, or the brand for that festival. And it's always difficult about how that sits, then nests within the museum's brand. Do you think that's kind of mission impossible, or do you want to comment on, how it can be done, or how it can be the sort of things you think through to make it successful?
Well, I think if a good consultant is going to do the job properly, they would know at the beginning that there would be lots of co-brands or partner brands. And you would think there'd be a way to do that, but we all know, of course, that that's where identities fall down. That's where a brand falls down, isn't it? You've got these great big design manuals, and the important design consultant says X, Y, and Z, but then internally the team say, what about A, B, and C? I think that there should be ways. That's why Corinne's question and my answer was flexibility. I think there should be ways to deal with that. I think that if your structure is so rigid that it can't deal with it, then that's either something has to give. Either the structure must change and be flexible, or dare I say, if you have a structure which is so rigid that it can't give, then perhaps the play, as it were, to use your example, has to go into the museum style. I think that's a shame, personally, because I think we're all grown-ups now, and I think we can all understand how we can be a bit looser with the way that we work. 15 years ago, we weren't having a conversation about digital design. We were still sticking logos down on bits of paper. So it was difficult, wasn't it, to let things mix and match. But now I think it's possible. The problem, of course, comes if and I'm afraid I can't remember what Play looks like. I'm not sure if I've seen it. But if there's a huge change in aesthetic between Play and the Powerhouse brand, for example, then that is a problem. And how you navigate that is really difficult. And I must say, from this side of the fence, there's a part of me where my heart sinks when the education team are brought in and say, okay, we have to communicate to children, so we want to do it with crayons. And then I sort of go like this. Because it strikes me that children are much more sophisticated than that. Children can understand sophisticated ideas. So that 3D summer thing I showed you very briefly, that's aimed at kids. It doesn't have drawings on it. So.
Okay, any other question? Yes? There is one question here on the third row.
Hi, Michael. I'm Jarrell from Mataf, Arab Museum of Modern Art in Doha, Qatar. For institutions that require developing brand applications that involve several languages, for our case, our material has to be bilingual all the time. So imagine all the type that needs to appear on the poster or on the flyer. What advice would you give us in terms of making decisions about whether one language is important than another?
Okay.
Do you have any insights about that in terms of design?
It's a very good question. We're actually ourselves looking at a similar issue at the moment, and one of the solutions we've been coming on in partnership with the client actually was that perhaps you need a state which is in English, a state which is in Arabic, for example, in your case, and a state which is also bilingual. And as you probably know, the people in the room who've looked at, when you start translating logos, you might end up with 10, 12, 15 words, and that's, if there's a logo as well, you've got a symbol, then you've got 15 words next to it, and you end up with a bit of a design disaster. But I think it's part of the designer's job to try and help you navigate your way through that. So, for example, if the designers say to you and you're in a genuinely bilingual environment where you can't have a bilingual logo, then that's a mistake. There will always be instances where a bilingual logo is used, I think it's interesting that you could easily have one which was English and one which was Arabic, as I think you have in your case, as I believe. But there will be instances where the two have to go together, and it's part of our job as advisors to help navigate your way through that. Of course, if a client is particularly wordy, and I'm picking my words carefully, but I know that some of the Arabic museums can be quite wordy, then I think that the emphasis, again, is on the team and the consultant, i.e. people like me, to find visual ideas which are incredible and arresting, and will just take your attention away from the fact that there's 17 words in the corner, and let the 17 words stay in the corner, and let the other 95% of the poster or the website or do the work, and really don't expect 18 bilingual words to do the work for you. It's not going to do the work. Let what else is on there do the work. It's tough. It's really difficult. But I think it's possible. We are trying to work in English and Arabic at the moment, and that's quite a challenge. But it's a challenge working in Japanese and Chinese, which we've, I think it's just part of the job of whoever you're working with to deal with it. And if they don't deal with it, then you need to say to them, well, deal with it. Don't just give me this bullshit. Deal with it. It's part of the job, really. Well, increasingly, it's part of the job. That's a good.
Great. Thank you very much. Final question. What is your favorite color? It's not my question, it's Damien's question.
It's a very dangerous question, because
yes.
the lady who answered that yesterday started immediately talking about sex.
Why not?
and now, of course, the only thing I can remember from that session is the question about colour and talking about sex. So.
Okay.
All colours. I'm going to avoid that.
Thank you very much.